been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.
Well, and I feel like we also, I remember the quote. The quote is, "Pressure is a privilege." And it's like a goofy quote, but it's so, it hit me like a brick today.
Yeah.
And I think about how much I tried to just like, oh, I don't want there to be any like stress or pressure, and how much I try to design around that in my day to day. And it's like, I think that pretty much just guarantees that you're not going to grow if you try to block yourself off from that. So,
and I have a similar.
I want to start embracing that a little more, you know, like embrace the pressure, embrace like, not to where I'm like like dying, you know, obviously, but especially in my work, just like embrace that and feel that a little more.
I have a saying that I use, and I sometimes say it to my wife more in the literal meaning of the word, but then I also apply it to this as well. But I think I use it in a screenplay. That's when it started back when I was in LA. Like a grizzly cop character said it in a scene that I really liked, but the line was, you know, pain is a choice. And he's talking to like toxic masculinity and all that, like, you know, don't be a wuss. Like, you like, it hurts, but you can choose for it not to. Yeah. But
but it's so real. Like, I mean, all we've talked about tonight.
Yeah.
Especially in like pre-show and everything, just like, it is like, that's just one reaction you could have to the situation at hand.
And that's like, you know, your kid's going to stay home sick, or your wheels get ripped off your car, and the pain that you're feeling from that. I think there's an argument that how painful it is a choice. Yeah. You can do things to embrace your new reality. Yeah. You can try to look at the silver lining of it, right? Which you've already just mentioned in your instance, that there is a little, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you start to sort of track as things play out more long term. A lot of times you can look back on and go, that needed to happen.
That had a positive outcome. Yeah.
That was a net win.
I think most things end up being net wins.
I think so too.
But I also think that if you embrace, you almost have to like apply it, act as is. Sure. Or act as if. Rather, you almost have to apply that mindset in order for things to play out that way. Yeah. Because I do know people who kind of do approach everything with a negative attitude. And I don't want to be like, oh, don't be negative, but I mean, negativity is toxic. Negativity spreads quickly. Yeah. And I think if there's anybody out there who is doubtful of this, like, just try it. Like, try it for a week. No matter what happens, just always try to find like, what's an optimistic outcome. We listened to something recently, a podcast Audrey and I did, about cynicism. Yeah. Just like how cynics get put on this pedestal as like the cynical genius or whatever. Right. And in reality and in statistically, like, that doesn't match up with what actually happens. Usually cynics are, they have a much harder time in life. They have a much, less fulfilling whatever it is. And, that might not be the narrative that's applied to it, but it is the reality. And I think, you get to choose how you want to react to a situation. And it might not always be obvious at first. And we talked about this, like the difference between intellectually responding and like physical response. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's important to try to maintain positive outlook.
Well, and I think there's things in our zeitgeist that shade that as well. I think of people who frame this way of thinking in terms of sports, right? You're on offense or you're on defense. The cynic, to me, the image that I come up with is they have a lot of closed doors. Yeah. Versus someone like me who might come across as
Matt's the most introverted or extroverted introvert I've ever met in my entire life.
But sometimes I think I can come across as, and I don't really care how I come across, but sometimes I think, and I'm not like Mr. Every door in my spiritual being is open and I'm super positive and all that. I have all my, areas of cynicism and negative thoughts and fears and all that stuff. But overall, I think definitely glass half full versus half empty. And
I would agree. I think that's part of the reason you and I get along so well, because we always come out of we're like optimists with like a little cynical side.
Yeah, a little bit.
And then you get us together and it's just the optimism overpowers.
That's right.
Whereas like on an individual level, the cynicism is kind of always like, oh, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
And so you get us together and we always leave it feeling more optimistic than cynical. And I think it's part of the reason why, I mean, we've had, hundreds and hundreds of hours of conversation at this point. Yeah. And I feel like every time we do, I always end up leaving feeling a little bit more, just okay with my place in the world. And yeah, it's like, it's a good balance. You got to find people like that too.
Well, especially we're at different stages of our life, age-wise.
Which is so funny because I never think about your age.
Yeah.
Until I think about your age. Like, I mean, we're substantially different.
Yes.
Like a decade different.
Easily.
Yeah. And
almost two.
No. And it's just, it's not something that I really.
Yeah. I think I'm just like sort of age invisible.
Yeah.
There's something that people are always shocked by how old I am. And I think with you kids, I don't know. I can merge between generations or something. I don't know what it is.
I feel like when you're having a conversation about things that actually matter.
Yeah.
And I don't want to. That sounds really bad. Like things that actually matter. But I do think you've kind of cut out. It helps that you and I have a lot of similar interests and things like that. But all of that aside, when you do pull out a lot of like the bullshit of a day-to-day mundane conversation.
And just like what's going on culturally, younger people are going to be tapped into different things. Like I feel definitely a gulf when I see you whipping through AI stuff. And I'm like my dad watching me play a video game. Like, what the hell is this? And, I know how to play pinball, son. What's this? What's this Tecmo Bowl?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. So like, there's moments like that where I'm like, Alex is like 28 years old or however old you are. Like he's doing things that I don't easily do and can figure out. But then you also do stuff with old shit too. Like
a lot of,
typewriters.
Honestly, a lot more shit with old stuff. Like, no, I mean, I think, that's part of that's just. So that's an interest of mine.
But you find those areas of sort of timelessness, right?
Yeah.
Conversations about life issues and things that are going on, books that are from the past, from maybe especially mostly the past.
The future.
We're not really. We're going to see movies from the 30s together. So we didn't go see Alien Romulus, but we went and saw Citizen Kane.
Holy cow! Should we talk about that on this podcast?
I kept thinking of like a title for something because after we talked, I was like, "This is the sort of the lame title," but it's like something like I saw Citizen Kane for the third time for the first time.
Yeah,
something. That. Like,
I think that's pretty much sums it up. Like I've seen it. Yeah, I'd seen it a couple of times prior, but
that's where the age melts away, right? Because we have a little bit of a sidewalk talk, and we wanted to talk more, but I had to go home. But we can go see a movie like that and then have a conversation that makes our age and our life experiences. Obviously, we bring to bear on the conversation, but we're not thinking about them while we talk about this, profound piece of work.
Yeah, I think. It is there's a quality of timelessness that you can have. And if I honestly, I think you should, I have another really close friend who's 85.
Yeah.
And like we can have a conversation.
Right.
And like I talked to him about like blockchain and he was like, all right, I don't know about this. Like I don't know. But no, I mean, but you can get into a conversation about great literature or film that really moved you.
Well, the underlying
writing.
spirit of blockchain, you can talk about decentralization. He can understand that. He may not understand the details and technological whatever of blockchain,
well,
but he can be like,
everything. I think everything. I guess the bigger picture point is everything can be broken down into like a core element that is essentially timeless.
That's right, and universally, we can connect to it universally.
And you've got to cut through the culture. Like there's always going to be like culture and like PR spin kind of like containers on everything,
right?
And you've got to figure out a way to cut through all of that. I mean, it's not like I have to sit here and figure out like how am I going to relate to Matt? Like we just talk,
right? Yeah, it just happens.
I mean, a lot of people in my life I think are like that.
Sure.
I don't really try to. The way I found the most success, and I think, this is a thing that great art has this quality too, is you're not, I try to not have, I just have the conversation that I want to have.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to change my, what I feel like talking about or what I'm interested. Like I might, I might try to align our interests a little bit or something, but if I have an observation about something, I'm not going to be like, well, let me make assumptions about this person. I'm just going to, hey, I feel like this because of this, and I saw this and noticed this. And you know what? I feel like most people, when you just level with them and just are open and authentic, they get it.
Yeah.
And they're gonna kind of be there with you. They're going to be able to,
especially if they're able to see past the surface.
Yeah.
And talk about the underlying elements
Yeah.
of it. And that is a challenge sometimes. I've had conversations with people where it's hard to get past surface culture, the weather, sports game that was on last weekend. Like, okay, like, but what's, what do you think about what's going on underneath all that?
Yeah.
And some people just don't.
I have relationships with some people I feel like who it's really tough to get past that.
And you can have good relationships because you can talk about video games or
Yeah.
sports or whatever, and like that's satisfying enough. But the deeper, more meaningful connections I have is where we start looking below those layers.
Go beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's definitely people who, oh yeah, that's just the guy I talk about football with, or that's like, whatever.
Chew the fat with.
Yeah, and typically that may be person at a coffee shop or person at the gym or whatever. But yeah, I think most people are open to, if you're willing to just bring it up in conversation, like something a little deeper. Most people are. I love asking the question, like, how do you feel about that?
Right.
Like it's a goofy, but most people have, like, everybody's, for the most part, they've got some depth to them.
Yeah.
And I think we don't give that enough opportunity to come out most of the time. I do think, though, there is a new phenomenon that I've observed, and this is more in the last few years, where some people, you'd never have their attention.
Yep.
I don't know if that's something that you've observed too, but
there are times where someone's asked me a question, and it's not some big, profound question. And I can be overly verbose, of course, but I'll start giving an answer, and I can feel them disconnect.
Yeah.
Now, they might still be looking at me or nodding their head or whatever, but they're not really listening.
Yeah.
In like a bad way. Now, I've had conversations with you where something you say gets me going. Like, that's something I want to introduce.
And you're like off on a new...
And I'm processing that, and I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
But it's not as deep as it should be.
Yeah.
It's still engaged. It's still processing what you're saying, but it's a little bit more on the surface and not like really understanding.
You're not like hanging
the depth
on,
of what you're saying.
Not that there's a like boundless depth to
no, but the beauty of having this podcast and edit, you editing it, but then me pulling clips, there's been times where you've made a point or asked a question or, and there's a context that you've set up and I respond where I'm literally watching myself in Final Cut where I'll respond to you in a way that is a little generic.
Yeah.
Because I remember, you were thinking about this. And while you're clocking what Alex is saying and you can give a generic response that shows that you heard what he said, you're not really understanding what he's saying.
You're playing by the rules of the conversation, but you're not. Yeah.
You're not really listening.
Yeah. Likewise, I'm sure that's happened.
Sure.
We've done 30 hours of
because I'll sit there and watch it back and be like, oh, that's what he was asking, or that's what he was getting at, or that's what he was trying to pull out of me. I'm like,
that happens.
Totally missed that.
I noticed that in conversation a lot, where, especially in this more you were not the person or there's not one person. It's just some phenomenon that I've noticed where I'll have a conversation. And typically when I say it and I'll get a response. And maybe this is something I should work on, but I don't double down on it.
Right.
Because you don't ever want, part of me feels like, oh, am I being condescending by doubling down on the question? So I tend not to. And it really takes the steam out of a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens when we're having conversation very much. And also I think there's a level of familiarity.
Sure.
Where we're kind of, I don't know. We kind of have experienced each other in different moods and modes,
but there is certainly, and I have other friends, or even speaking to my wife, where you feel yourself happily getting pulled in further and further to the lower circles of the depths of the conversation, the exchange, the ideas that you're working through. For the people that I was referencing, that I feel them drift away right away.
Yeah.
They're more focused on, I think, what state they want to be in. Okay, I was asking a question and I'm kind of interested in the answer, but not that interested.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to watching television or doing my own thing or whatever.
Honestly, I hate
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I'm someone that if you're going to ask me a question, I'm going to go hard on it because I think you're as curious as I am when I ask a question, but they're not.
Yeah.
So I have to learn with those people, and this is personality cartography. I have to kind of map those tendencies and go, all right, when this person asks me a question, they just need
a couple of words.
Answer.
Yeah, in and out.
They don't want. Well, this all started in 1918. So we'll get to the present. Let me set up the context.
Let's set the stage, and then we're going to build off of that.
So the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
How does that relate to the lights that they use in that movie that we saw? Oh boy.
No, I think it's, taking it back to the dopamine thing. Yeah. It's just, I think that's a side effect of being too addicted to quick dopamine.
Sure. Yeah.
You hear about people doing the dopamine fasts or whatever, where they'll just completely unhook from anything.
Interesting.
And you hear, it's actually really interesting because people will say, oh, time slows down.
Yeah.
Time seems to really slow down and you become much more aware of each moment. But then also doing that for a couple of weeks or, whatever. Some people are crazy about it.
Sure.
I mean, this is food and music and visual stimulation. And they're and then you'll listen to a shitty song on a radio at a pub.
Yeah.
And it's you're in, having the greatest religious experience of your life.
Interesting.
And I'm there's a bit of me that understands. I think it's difficult when we're in this world where we're just constantly being fed dopamine. And I mean, this is there's a bit of hypocrisy in what I'm saying, because I definitely am, I can get sucked down a YouTube scroll, doom scroll or whatever. And I try to get out of that as much as possible. But when you do get away from it, you're able to engage with stuff on such a deeper level. So, started watching The Wire a couple of weeks ago, and I think we covered this a little in the last episode. And it's like, that was a show that demanded my attention in a way that I wasn't willing to give it when I tried to watch it prior. And now that I've given it my attention, it's just like, it blows me away. It's not a hot take to be like, oh, The Wire's good.
Right.
like obviously it's a great, but it really, when you give it the proper attention, and I think the proper amount of like dopamine disconnect,
when you're present with it.
Yeah, you're present with it. You're there moment to moment to moment. You're not sitting there watching
not seeing
it.
what it's going to give you.
Yeah, you're not thinking about like, what am I going to do after this?
Yeah.
Or like, oh, what's happening here?
Exactly.
You're just there, and that's all that there is. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the same with, God, that's what's so good about seeing movies in the theater.
I was just saying, the same thought popped into my head, like,
because we saw Citizen
it's an immersive
Kane,
experience.
and that was the first time I'd seen it in the theater.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere to go when you're in the theater.
You can't get no phone,
you don't
conversation,
and it's not even like if we're watching a movie here, it's not like I'm in my phone or
no. But you can pause it. You can get up. You can talk to Audrey. You can, you can.
There's just more of a surrounding.
Yeah.
You're in a dark theater. You're there.
There are other things that are accessible, even if you don't access them.
Yeah,
it's just a different state.
Absolutely.
And you're right. I had the same experience with Citizen Kane. I think if I had it on when I was at home, there might have been moments where I checked out. There might have been moments where I was like, I'm kind of having to work hard to like get this.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of just want to watch somebody flip through a record bin at a thrift store and just not even think about anything.
Yeah.
Because that's almost a form of dopamine.
And it absolutely is.
Yeah.
And I get this thing like, oh man, I kind of just rather listen to like a podcast, or I kind of just rather do.
I want to get in a vibe.
Yeah, I want to have something that's like.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is what was causing all this dissatisfaction in my life, is just this like comfortably numb to like little bits of like IV drip dopamine. Just here's a little, what's the next one? And then you're sitting there and you're being present for the job or whatever, and you're just kind of in the moment, but you're not experiencing anything.
Yeah.
You're not giving anything your attention properly. No. Nothing. And me personally, like I can only handle so many months of that before it was just like starting to tear my soul apart.
Yep.
And I think it's a great experience watching somebody flip through and then find that one record. And to give context to what we're talking about, you were talking about there's videos where people
they film themselves, they do a little intro, they film themselves going to thrift stores, estate sales, whatever, and they literally run the video. The heart of the video is them quietly flipping through a record bin with like 100 records, and you see what they pull out, what they don't, and you think about, oh, what's that record? Or I would have pulled that one, or oh, they missed that one that's really valuable. It's little dopamine hits, because every time they flip the record, it might be some awesome thing.
Yeah.
Or if they're flipping through the crappiest records that you see at every thrift store, and all of a sudden there's a Fleetwood Mac record, you're like, holy shit. And you get this little hit. Yeah. And so like I was saying, it is something that kind of is a little mindless, because you're not working to understand it, but you are just at the feed for dopamine going, when are they going to give me a little bump here? Ready for a little bump. Oh, Fleetwood Mac. Oh, shit.
We saw a meme the other day. It was like two lab mice that escaped from the lab. They're like, I'm glad to be out of that place, but I would love to hit that cocaine button again.
Exactly. Now, real quick, I have one thing. So the thing that you said we talked about Citizen Kane. To me, this is the greatest argument for repertory theater out there, because some of the most profound movie-going experiences I've had are with older films. Like when I went to Alamo Drafthouse to see the Kubrick series, and I saw Barry Lyndon. Long-ass movie, right?
Amazing movie, though.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
especially for me.
I mean, most of the movies that I love are from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and then probably the 70s is my favorite decade.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you know, I mean, the 80s, there's plenty of good things.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, most of the films that I love are, I mean, I literally have such a disconnect that people are like, oh yeah, that's from 1980.
Yep.
Or like, that's from 1974. And I'm like, oh, okay, 74.
But
and then they're like, 74. Yeah, that's 50 years ago. Right. And I'm just like, what do you mean? I'm living there right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something about that too, like knowing it's an old movie. Now, I'm 45 years old. Like I've been watching movies since basically E.T. came out in 1983, right? Like, so I've been around for plenty of movies that now we look back are quote unquote old, right? Anything before then,
cult classics, classics.
Anything before then, there's something that creeps into my head where it's like, oh, this is an old thing.
Yeah.
So there's like a permission that I give myself to check out or even turn it off if it's not grabbing me. But then a newer movie, there's something about the newness of it that makes it an automatic thing to just to watch it all. This is, I don't want this to make me sound like I'm like a dumb audience member, that I'm, and this goes back to dopamine.
We are dumb audience members at the end of the day.
Like, oh, this movie's old, therefore I can't watch it. There's something about an older movie that, at least with my brain, makes me feel like it's more okay to quit it than it is for a newer movie. I don't know why. I don't know what that is, but it's like, it's an older movie. Like it's just not as easy for you to watch these because it's an older film.
Yeah.
And what I love about repertory theater is what you said. You're sort of, I don't want to make it sound like I have to be trapped to sit and pay attention to Citizen Kane, but there's a reason I had never seen it. I mean, I went to film school. There's people who'd be like, you went to film school and you've never seen Citizen Kane? Like, you should have your degree revoked.
But like, Citizen Kane is popular.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, this is the greatest film ever made. But I feel like there's actually a very small amount of people that actually think it's like one of the greatest films ever made. I feel like it's the victim of its own legend in a way.
Well, and it might be a victim too of people watching it at home. Now, if I watched it at home, I don't know that I would give it the attention that I gave it in the theater.
Yeah.
I was just completely engrossed in that movie the whole time. And I do find that, and this is a shortcoming of mine, this is a criticism of mine, that when something is older and I'm watching it at home, I'm less focused on it, even though it's a masterpiece.
I want to dive into this.
And I'm concerned about that with The Wire, because I recall The Wire, it's shot on.
Yeah.
I don't know that they shot it on. I assume they shot it
2001.
on
2001, so I guess.
Yeah, so probably filmed, but I believe it's in
a
a 4:3
aspect. 2009.
A 4:3 aspect ratio, from what I remember.
I think the remastered is opened up. Yeah.
So like stupid things like that will make me go.
Yeah.
It just makes my brain go into a state of less attentiveness to it. I don't know why.
And like, but 4:3, like, there's films shot on 4:3, where that was just the theater projection aspect ratio.
Yeah.
So it's not like they were framed properly. It's not like it's a degrade in quality.
Absolutely.
Like, there's a difference between like a TV crop. But I want to come back to this permission to check out really quick though. I just want to wrap up my point on the record flipping in regard to
sorry, I took us on the repertory.
No. I want to come back to the repertory theater. But yeah, the only point I had to make, and it's it's a pretty obvious point anyways, but it's just when you find something that begs for your attention, and you give it the attention that it begs for, it's so much more rewarding than you could just dopamine right into your veins.
That's right.
And I think it's still more rewarding when you engage with something that is begging for your attention in a way that it's calling for, and then you immediately are going to be able to see, like, this is a profound experience. And I think I'm having that with The Wire.
Yep.
Any great piece of art that I've encountered in my life, I've had that with. and Citizen Kane, obviously, we had that with. Like, why? I want to now just go back to the why? Like, it's interesting to me because I wonder if it's because I think I might have done that too at one point, and then I think I've watched so much old film that I don't really. Watching old film was one of the like, it's almost up there with like doing like psychedelics or something for me, and just transformative experience in the sense that it showed me that everything's the same. Like we're experiencing the same everything. There's just a different like thin layer of context on it all.
That's right.
Because I'll go back and I'll watch a film from the 20s and I'm like, yeah, this is me, on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I'll go back and I'll watch films from the 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s. And, if it's well made and if it's crafted and in a way that is aware of that kind of through line that humans have, then it's always something. It always has something to give me. And I feel like at first maybe that wasn't as... See, but I know that you also feel that way about older work. So it's like...
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm experiencing is I think the internet, social media, YouTube, all of those have been tools that have made me, especially as the intensity of my personal work, right? So I've transitioned from someone who does work for other people and then seeks out film, television, theater, music to give me an experience that is profound, to give me deeper meaning, to see things, to be present while I watch something. As being an employee dropped and then working for myself increased, and all of the intensity that I've given to my work, whether it was work that was a little bit more rote or a little bit more mechanical versus creative and soul giving and all this stuff.
All this corny shit.
When I come away from that, I keep hitting the mic, I'm an idiot. When I come away from that, I want to just be in a vibe. I want to tune out. I want to not be present. I want to be a little detached and disconnected.
It's like the 12-hour shift, right? Yeah. You get home, you're just like, you've been, pouring concrete or something.
See, in my analogy, in that situation, I am so starved of deeper meaning and art and profound drama and all that my escape was to then soak it all up at night. Like, I'm going to watch Mad Men, or I'm going to watch this old movie, or I'm going to do this because I was pouring concrete all day. Now that I'm making my own work or going out and doing photography or making a YouTube video or whatever I'm doing that's exhausting me creatively.
You don't want to go home and do the same thing.
I don't want to go home and then work to like be in that same headspace. I want to kind of check out a little bit and just vibe out to something simple.
I get it.
And it's not necessarily a good thing. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but that's what I have.
No, I totally understand. Yeah, I think I'm a victim to that too from time to time. I think that part of it is just that. I think part of it is completely training yourself to kind of constantly seek out something a little.
And that's where the repertory theater comes in.
Yeah.
Not that that's the answer, but I look at Alamo and film streams and go, what movies am I going to go out and see, especially movies that I may have avoided. I think I personally avoided Barry Lyndon because I knew it was so long.
I like to think, though, like, at times the escape for a lot of these things was like the easy dopamine escape was like reading, Moby Dick.
Right. I know, right. One more chapter on the high seas.
We've almost just, you start to strip things down layer by layer by layer, and you lose at some point I think you start to lose something.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's, where is that? Like there's always been escapism, but kind of the average level of quality has dropped to a point where I don't know, that sounds terrible. I don't know if I mean that. But just there is there is access now to almost raw dopamine.
Yeah,
I guess.
And that's because of the democratization of making stuff. You can have, everything from OnlyFans to YouTube to, we all have the tools.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just video, but we all have the tools. We can self-publish a novel. We can write poetry and put it on the website. We can have a vlog. We can have a blog, whatever it is. We all can make stuff. And so therefore, the amount of stuff out there for people to find that they gravitate toward is vast, but then obviously because everybody can do it, the quality can be, I don't know, lower, but then it also can be sort of well engineered in that it's sensationalistic or it's extreme concept.
Well, I'm thinking of like a top 10 list. Like what's like, if you have any kind of top 10 list of something that you're vaguely interested in, it can be the shittiest thing of all time, but you're engaged because you're like,
what's number one?
What's next? What's number one? What's number two? Why is that? And we've boiled things down to like the core level of sensationalism or just pure, just dopamine that it's kind of hard to, what do you do though? Is that the best form of it? Or do you think like, are we just being, old and idealistic by sitting here saying like, no, you should engage with this, or like there is some greater level of, humanity if you engage with these works? Or is it just like, no, it's fine. Like it serves the purpose. Like media's purpose is to give you a hit of dopamine. So if we can do it efficiently and effectively,
I think to kind of bring things full circle, right? We talked about sitting in the studio 10 hours a day, day in and day out. It's unhealthy. It's too much. It causes problems. You need to get out. You need to experience stuff. I think same thing with what we watch, what we consume. We have to ebb and flow through the greatest works. Go to the Jocelyn Art Museum one day and then watch somebody flip through records on YouTube. It's okay to want to watch something kind of dumb. Read a romance novel or a pulp novel, then read Moby Dick. Fluctuate between these places. It's all out there. And if you like watching the Smurfs, watch the Smurfs. And if you like watching The Wire on Tuesday nights, then watch the better, better stuff. It's okay.
I think there's this weird idea that like we have to I have to get through this. I have to read this. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from engaging with difficult and complex works.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, there's no you don't die and it's like, well, I read these 100 books, so I am therefore
War and Peace, Moby Dick, all checked off the list.
It's like, so now my afterlife will be secured.
People will think I'm a profound person.
There's no. It's just like if you enjoy engaging with those things, engage with them. And really, I think there's so much to be gained and taken from them. But if you don't enjoy, I want to clarify, I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I just don't like that stuff. And they've never really given it an actual chance because maybe they are so clouded by just quick dopamine or whatever. So I would really push for anybody who, hasn't actually given it a chance to give it a chance. But you might just find not for me.
Didn't
and
resonate.
It's you know what? You have a finite amount of time. Don't spend it doing stuff that you really don't care about. I think.
And that, goes back to doing what you want versus what's expected of you.
Yeah.
I do think we need to challenge ourselves sometimes to try new media, or
mediums of expression,
or
media.
eras of a media that we like. You like film? Somebody might say, I don't watch black and white movies.
Yeah,
well, just try it.
Personally would recommend anybody watch older films because I think it really gives you great context. It's kind of one of the reasons that I think film and photography. Hi, little puppy.
And that's why I keep talking about repertory. If you struggle with maybe watching that stuff at home, or you think you might, go to the movies and see it, because you ain't going anywhere else unless you walk out. Which I mean, there's like 2 movies I've walked out of my whole life, but there's something special about. And I tell you this all the time, like, how lucky are we that we have 2 theaters that show old movies?
Yeah,
I saw Barry Lyndon this year and Citizen Kane.
Yeah,
like, it's incredible. And I love it. I mean, and I don't think I would have had as deep and rich of an experience with both those films had I watched them at home.
Yeah,
I just don't.
Yeah.
Now, newer movies, like if I watched Alien Romulus at home versus in the theater, I think I probably would have had a comparable experience.
Yeah.
Would the sound have been as good? Would the immersiveness have been as good, et cetera? I think my takeaway of the movie would have been roughly the same.
Yeah.
And I would not have had any difficulty being present with it. And it's a fault of mine that I may struggle with being present with a movie that's older.
I think that's, but I think also,
but it's also something I can. The more you do it, you realize, there's so much value that I'm getting from these older films that I'm gonna change that default thought or that default thinking.
Eventually it just becomes second nature almost.
Right. Like it is for you.
I do think that...
Oh, actually, you might be to the point where you're like, modern movies. I can't be present with modern movies. Because...
I mean, it is difficult to be... But I think it's just a filter that I've developed.
Yeah.
Like, there's still modern movies that I see and I'm like, that was unbelievable. Yeah. Like, what have I seen in the last year? Like, Poor Things.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Terrific.
It just blew my mind.
Zone of interest. We really
Zone of interest.
Yeah, love it.
Like there's still stuff that I'll see.
Absolutely.
And it cracks the barrier. And I think it's made me a better critic.
Sure.
I mean, I don't really care about being a critic. I don't really care about opinion, but I do think like I care about them in the sense that they influence my own decision making and my own work.
Yeah.
And I still want to make films. That's still what I want. Like I want to get to that point. I want to break into that. Like, and so everything I see is informing that.
That's right.
And everything I see is pushing me to like, okay, this is, even if it's subconscious, this is good, this is bad. Don't do this, do this. Right. And that's just a matter of taste. But no, I think maybe even you're subconsciously giving those older films the level of respect by being like, I have to be in the theater to engage with this, because maybe it is just modern cinema, especially like the blockbuster film, is highly effective at tapping into quick release dopamine.
Right.
And I'm not saying that means it's completely bad, but maybe it is more effective at tapping into that quick release dopamine.
Well, they do that too by, and I'm susceptible to it. I love a good comic book movie. I was psyched to see Alien Romulus. You see the marketing, they drop the trailer, all that stuff. Like
I've heard the new Gladiator 2 is going to be like stellar.
Yeah, I will probably go see it.
Yeah.
So you have all that, for lack of a better word, hype surrounding this stuff that puts you in a state of presence with it, because it's all been built up to get you in that theater. And to get you in that seat, whereas Barry Lyndon, it's like, to me, it's almost like, well, they shot it all with natural light. They shot it. It's 3 hours. There's an intermission. Like, there's all these things that tend to be the takeaways for the majority of people. And it's not that it's good or bad, but it's a really long movie. It's a polarizing movie of Kubrick's maybe, or these things. So it's not like there's hype and everybody's amped to go see it. There's all this momentum and positive energy toward it, there's like some negative and some positive. It took me a lot of viewings to really access The Shining on a deep level.
Yeah.
And now it's probably one of my top 5, top 7 favorite films of all time. So again, the repertory theater, having access to these things, and I did in Los Angeles. I was 2 miles away, if that, from the New Beverly Theater. That while I was living there, Quentin Tarantino took over, and he would show his 35 millimeter prints of, old Burt Reynolds
crazy
movies
out of
and
nowhere,
all this stuff, and you're like, you're with an audience, they're all engaged. It's just an amazing experience, and I had that feeling again with Citizen Kane, with you and Audrey and me, and a relatively full full auditorium, full theater, seeing a 35 millimeter print,
scratched up 30. A little rough. But for sure.
That was part of the beauty of it as well. So,
God, it was just like, it felt like it could have been made.
Oh yeah.
Like, I know that people say this, and obviously I don't mean this on every level, but it felt like it could have been made yesterday.
I felt that throughout the entire thing. I felt like this movie could have been made yesterday. It just looks like they used old shit to make it.
Yeah.
Like they just had a bunch of old tools.
I've come around on like Orson Welles and just how he works.
That's why I picked up that War of the Worlds record.
Yeah.
I've always known.
I'm so pumped. I want to
known
listen to that on your vinyl, because I've listened to the broadcast on like YouTube or whatever. But I mean, I've been just watching more of his films, and there's like a pace to him and a style to him that is a little bit jarring, and it feels a little amateur. But I think,
he's also trying something.
Well, and like it's one of those things where like the first time I saw it, I was like, not for me.
Yeah.
But then the more I've like forced myself to, and it's just taken time. It's just taken a lot of time to continuously.
I just referenced The Shining. It's the same thing for me. Like, you guys all, this is it for me.
We need to watch F is for Fake together.
Yeah.
So it's on my project list.
Yep.
It's one of those.
Okay.
So maybe I just invite you over that night.
Yeah.
Maybe you and Aaron come over or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. But I would love to just, F is for Fake is about, it's just this psycho film about like, it's documentary, and it's about art forgery.
Yeah.
But the film is a forgery.
Right.
It's like changed the way I looked at documentary filmmaking when I first saw it. It was one of those things that got me to like, because the first Orson Welles film I saw was Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
And you hear about him, like I remember taking film class freshman year of college, and it's like Orson Welles. Like,
oh yeah,
it's fucking Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Everybody in the class is like, yeah, Orson Welles and Wes Anderson, and like you're like, okay. And I really feel like I just, I don't know. I was like, okay. And then it came, continuing to engage with his work over the many years after that. It's opened it up in a way that you almost have to let the hype die, and then go back in and see what's on the other side. And I think that's with anything. We just get completely blinded by this hype.
Absolutely.
Vertigo.
Yeah.
We saw Vertigo in the theater. I've seen that several times. I have a very high regard for that film. And seeing it in theaters just put it on a different level for me. I don't know why, but we went to see that a few weeks ago, and it was like, whoa.
I think
there are some things in here that I've never even picked up on that are just like,
it has to
one of my favorites.
It has to be a big part of it. Has to be how immersive it is and how captive you are.
Yeah. And just, I love when the ideas aren't simple. Like it's dealing with like everything has an idea. Every sequence, every scene, there's an idea that's being contended with, and it's not an idea that I'm maybe familiar with, but it's an idea that I'm familiar with on like on a very primal level.
Sure.
I don't know, man. Only the best.
I know.
Do that.
Only the best.
What else we got? I think that's about it.
I think we can call it good. Good chat.
I wonder if we'll salve it. Maybe we'll put like the first part with the scratch. I don't know.
Just see what we can.
Maybe
do
we
with
release it as honestly. Maybe we just put it up as bonus.
Yeah.
And we'll release the podcast episode, and then we'll say, hey, the audio was bad here, but we thought the conversation was good.
Yeah.
And here you go. If you're interested.
Yeah. And I can take the audio and see if our friendly AI can do anything with it.
You might be better at getting the audio clean than I am, but
yeah, I got to figure out what tools are out there. I know Premiere Pro has something that does it.
I can try the Premiere Pro one. Yeah.
I've heard amazing things about it.
Yeah.
That it can take.
I know DaVinci just released a pretty stellar update too. I haven't played with it much.
Whatever one.
I
takes
know
to
I'm
shoot
like
in
I know I'm
audio.
I know I'm getting past the point of like that world.
Yeah.
When I'm like DaVinci releases a crazy update and I'm just like, oh, whatever. Can I still press this button to do that?
Yep.
I feel like especially like we used to be so plugged in. It was like, do you hear about DaVinci's update?
Oh, dude, 17.5 is
incredible. So good. It's like, all right, whatever.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer.